Recording.
Thank you. So we study now the voluntariness or voluntarity. And someone they call it voluntarity or voluntariness. Father Wallace used the word voluntarity. Father Fagote used the word voluntariness. Okay, what is voluntarity? Page 376. It is the character of the human act that is free. That is performed willingly, with the will, with adequate knowledge of the circumstances, and without necessitation from external forces. That means with freedom. So it's an act accomplished with will, with the light of the intellect, knowing the circumstances, the motive, etc., and free act of the will. This characterization arises in the context of man having an ultimate end. It is what we studied just before. We tend toward the perfect good, and we know that through metaphysics and philosophy of God, that the perfect good is the ultimate end is God. In requiring deliberation and choice. Remember that the act of analysis of St. Thomas, and if you have that in front of you, it will be useful to have that analysis. And requiring, so as to select the means whereby to achieve and realize the end in particular. That is the definition. At the same time, is a kind of synthesis of what we studied last week. When we studied the human act, the analysis of the human act by St. Thomas, and we saw continually the role of the intellect and the role of the will. And we saw that the moral act, it is here 6 and 8. The act of to do or not to do, decide to do or not to do, and the choice of the means. That is here, is the morality of the act. That is the preparation, the decision, and to do or not to do. That is the act of the will enlightened by the intellect. Both are necessary, but the formal act, moral act, depend on the will. My intellect can know what is good, what I have to do, but it's not enough. I must be willing to do that. Okay? I continue. Once more, man is not free to choose just any end as perfective of the kind agent he is. We saw that. Voluntas ut natura. Voluntas ut natura. By nature, we tend toward the perfect good. We have no choice. Or perfect bliss. Any more than he can constitute his own nature, otherwise than it is. In fact, man chooses according to his nature. In fact, what is willing, it is an activity. And the activity is in the nature. You remember what is a nature? Is the essence as principle of activity. And that is nature. So man, when he takes a decision, he must act according to his nature. And when I decide to do something, I do a human act. By nature, I am intelligent and free. So when I do some action as intelligent and free, I tend necessarily toward the perfect good, ut natura. But in the reality of daily life, as free, my will is not determined by any little good. No finite good can determine my will. Therefore, I determine myself to take that good or that mean, and that is auto-determination, self-determination. So freedom essentially is self-determination, mastery, the same thing. I am the master of my acts because I decide to do or not to do, to choose that or not to choose that. But I am not free to tend toward the good. Okay? I continue. But unlike other cosmic agents, man must direct himself to the end and recognize as is. It is when I determine here, when I want to determine, when I master, when I decide, it is from myself. It is myself who decide what is for me the concrete good, the finite good, knowing that not a single finite good can satisfy my appetite for happiness. So we must be aware of that. It is because of that, because I know that nothing on earth can satisfy my happiness because we die. It is because of that I can choose what I want. I am not determined. Think about Saint Francis of Assisi. He was the son of the richest man of the town, of the city, and he decided to become poor and live with the poor, take care of the leper, you know. So that he decided himself what was for him the good. When he chose that in regard to attain the perfect good. In fact, every time we choose a good, through that good we choose, we are unconsciously or consciously tending toward final end, toward perfect good. In fact, it is because I am tending toward the perfect good that I am totally free in regard of every finite good. But in every finite good, when I take a decision, it is for the perfect good. Because there is some aspect of good leading me to attain my ultimate and perfect happiness. Not on earth, because I know I will die. You know, the only thought of death is spoiling every kind of pleasure. If you have a party, everybody is very happy after a few glasses of wine and scotch, and suddenly you receive a call and you know that the mother of one of the people there died suddenly. The party is finished. Because that, you know, in the time you represent that like a monk without face, with how do you say that? The sickle. The sickle. When you do in old churches in France, for example, you see that many times. To recall people, you know, but happiness is not on earth because a day or another you will be cut. You will be taken from that earth. So think about the perfect good. In fact, one of the roles of the church is to recall us that we are not forever on earth. No? What was the message on the Ash Wednesday?
Dust to return.
Yeah, dust, and you return to dust. After we can say also the gospel. No? But yes, we are free because we are not free. We are free in regard of finite good because not a single finite good can satisfy our appetite for happiness. Okay? And what is sin? It is when we take a finite good as our ultimate good. That is sin. Moral sin is that. When we put a mean as an end. When we decide that money, sex, or drug or pleasure will be for me my happiness, you know. It become my God, it become my end, and that make me forget my ultimate end. I continue. He must choose But we must choose to act or not to act. That is number 6. You remember that? Number 6. Huh? The decision to act or not to act. We call that voluntas of contradiction, huh? Or exercise. A will of contradiction or exercise. Huh? I exercise my capacity to do or not to do. To will or to will not to do. Be careful. Can a man will not will? In fact, of course, in English we say I will not do that. But in fact, it is I will to not do that. Even when we will to something negative, it is a lack of will, no? If I say, you ask your children, okay, go to bed. It is 10, then you have to go to bed. So if they don't go to bed, they will not to go to bed. They will. It is impossible not to will. Not to will is not to exist. To will or not, to will to do something, or to will not to do something. That is will. It's always we call that omission. Huh? We avoid to do our duty, for example. Huh? I continue. So in the various and fluctuating circumstances in which he finds himself, he finds the way in which he can achieve his good and perfection. So we have to choose among the many circumstances of life what is the way to attain our perfection. When we choose a good, a finite good, it is to choose a way to attain our happiness. We try to be happy buying a Mazda. We try to be happy buying a house. We try to be happy studying philosophy of God. The Compendium. I hope. Yes. It is because there is some good, otherwise you are crazy. As Father Brother Siberianus will say, huh? Crazy for Jesus. There is a reason. Of course, some people, you become a permanent deacon, stupid. It's better to play golf than to of course. But we judge the value of things according to our conception of happiness. Okay? In fact, the finite good are only ways, means to attain happiness. They have means for that. So now paragraph 4. The voluntary act is one that proceeds from such deliberation, from the intellect here, 1, 3, 5, 7, deliberation here. Here the knowledge of some good, and finally here to find the right ways to attain the end. Okay? So that is the part of voluntary, deliberation. There is no voluntary free will, the voluntary will, act of the will without deliberation. And involves a choice that is not necessitated by an external force. Free act of the will, decision. Free act of the will and free act choosing the means. All that is free, but they preceded, enumerated, enlightened by deliberation. In fact, I am repeating what we studied last week. Okay? Not a word about non-voluntary act. The voluntary act is deliberate, flowing unknowingly, we know, from a principle intrinsic to the agent, that means from our intellect. We cannot do any act of a moral act without using our intellect. Why? Because if we don't use our intellect, it's not a human act. What is the characteristic, the specific of man is to use his intellect. Huh? Okay? If using his intellect, he can, after that, use his will. I continue. The knowingly, here the word knowingly, is important because actions done out of ignorance usually do not satisfy this definition, and they are called non-voluntary or involuntary. Non-voluntary or involuntary. That means we do something, but without the consent of the will, full consent of the will. Some act, sometimes they are involuntary. We say sometimes deliberately. We don't deliberate. We don't reflect. We don't will that. It is accidental. For example, I'm sure when we drop some precious liquid on the floor, it is non-voluntary. Non-voluntary. Okay. The knowingly. Okay. Secondly, you have two words here. The case of illicit act, and now I come back to last week. Illicit act and imperative act. Illicit comes from the will itself. It is number 6 and 8. Here are illicit. The essential of the act of the will is to will. Is to will. After that is to put into action what I decided. But first is to will. Is to will. That we call illicit act. Is the principle intrinsic to the agent. If we don't will, we don't have the rest. So that is something. Secondly, now if I decide here, I have to put that into practice to command my different power. We call that imperative acts. And those imperative acts are prepared by the intellect, which indicates how we have to proceed. I go to New York, I have to stand up, to put my hat, to take my wallet, and to go to the station to buy a ticket, etc., etc. All those actions are imperative, that means commanded. In Latin, impero means to command. Empire, command. A power that comes from some under the sway, the influence of the will, is the principle intrinsic of the agent, the will. The will is moving all my different power, even my intellect. When I decide to use the mean here, my intellect is ordered by my will to pay attention. In fact, all those here are influenced by the will, even my reflection. For example, you are attentive to me, I hope, I am sure. It is because you will. You will that. Not only you know, you will. And the attention is not a question of only the intellect, it's a question of the will. Of course, a child can be attentive for a few seconds, but after that he is distracted. To continue to pay attention requires an act of the will. So the pay attention to the way I will put that into practice, to move my members, my imagination, my legs, etc., all that is imperative. In fact, we distinguish two kinds of action, the will. The will itself willing, we call the illicit act, and all the other acts flowing from that decision. Take, for example, marriage. The act of the will in marriage is very simple. I do. Think about the power of that act of the will. Incredible. For 50 years, 60 years, it will move you to live together. An act of the will. After that, all the other are imperated. It's the same for a priest. It's the same for. I take that example because it's a religion when he makes his vows. Or, in fact, when about people, when they make their vows, and then they are engaged one to the other, It is an act of decision. It is an act of the will here. But the rest, that lasts about 1 second. I do, maybe 2 seconds. I do, 2 seconds. 2 seconds, and that year, maybe 60 years, 64 years. I met a couple recently, 64, and they were very happy. And I told Matthew, he told me, you know, my wife is not the one I wanted to marry.
Oh my goodness.
I wanted to marry her sister. But I don't know what happened. By circumstances, I married her. I did the good choice because the other had a big problem. 64 years of marriage. One I do. Think about it. I understand why children are afraid of marriage. They are afraid. They are not able to take a decision by themselves, and they want to do a decision for 50 years, 60 years. Incredible. We think, incredible. And think about more about Abraham and Sarah. Huh? She was 90 years old. So not a special case.
God bless her.
The I do. That's interesting. The I do is enduring. Here you see the power of the will. That is a good example of the power of the will. Of course, sustained by the grace of God, but the power of the will. Sustaining during 60 years and more, every day, all your action. That is, for a Christian, is the grace of marriage. For me, it's incredible. It's above the human power. It's something. One decision. In my life, I have 2 cases like that. When my superior asked me, he said, "What do you want to study?" I say, "Science, physics." Huh? "Oh, you see, or pedagogy." "Oh, we know. We need my little brother. We need a teacher in philosophy at normal school. So therefore, you will do your license in philosophy." And I was so stupid. I say yes.
I do.
How many years?
No, it was in French. Oui. 1 second. Oui. No, my life changed completely. My life changed completely. You know, in every life we have some yes that are excessively important. They change your life completely. You know, maybe you have 1 or 2 or 3 in your life, but they are very, very important. Another one is when my superior asked me to go to mission. You know, so I said yes, but first 2 times I said no. I said no. Finally came 3rd time I said yes. The will of God. No, that is the power. You know, we speak about the power of the will with how do we say that? Scientology. Huh? Oh. Scientology, the power of the will. That is bullshit. The real power of the will is when you say yes, I do for the rest of your life. That is the power of the will. It is very that is a proof our will is spiritual. Our will is spiritual. Not a single material power can do that. You know, they are searching for spirit to prove the spirituality of the human being. That is a proof. The fidelity to the yes I said. I said. For me, it's one of the best examples of the spirituality of the human soul is there. The power of the will, and in front of all the difficulty to continue to say yes, yes, and yes, and yes. Okay, that is, I close my homily on marriage. No, but I have a great admiration for those who persevere. I have a brother, 52 years of marriage, will be 53 years soon, you know. And my parents, long time. It's a grace. Of course, a grace, but it is the fruit of your will with the grace of God, of course. That is theology. You know? But for a non-Christian, it is a big question. And for our people who change all the time, you know, changes the quality. So when they changed the wife, then they changed their car. Huh? Some actress, she lived here, not far from here, she had 7 husbands. In my life, I will have less car than she had husband. Okay, the voluntary. Voluntary is a reality, excessively important. No? In fact, it is the mother of our activity. Think about politicians, think about economy. All that is moved by the will. When you enter in, you make trade in the market, you teach, and you study to be a teacher, you study to be a nurse, you are a doctor. All that is based on the will. And that is, who changed the world is not the economy, it's not matter, as Marx said. It is the will of man. The will of great leader, good or bad, like Hitler, or like Saint Louis the Great, Saint Louis, France, or Charles de Gaulle. Good men change the history, bad men change the history by their will. The will is very, very powerful. And when you want to convince your children, you find that the will is very strong. It's not easy to manipulate. Huh? Okay? So now the voluntary, the cause of involuntarity, you have the violence. Violence is the source of outside, the agent. And violence contribute, in which the agent contribute to nothing. A good example of that was a famous man in France called Jean Moulin. Jean Moulin was it is not his real name, that is a code name. He was the chief of the resistance, you know, resistance for all France. And finally, the Gestapo took him and they tried to make him talk. But he said nothing. He suffered torture. It was horrible. You know, so he has a will even to go to death. For me, he's a holy atheist, agnostic. In fact, he was consequent. He has the power to triumph violence. In fact, violence is able to make you act physically, but violence cannot make you will. And when somebody changes his will under violence, most of the time because he has no more strength, he's completely, how do you say, he has no more strength. He is completely. A good example of that is Cardinal Vincenti. Cardinal Vincenti was the Archbishop of Budapest in Hungary. He came to Quebec just in 1949 for the Marial Congress. And at Christmas, just after, he said in a letter, I will be taken by the communists, I will be put in jail, I will be tortured, but don't believe what I will sign. In fact, one of the men who tortured wrote and they put him 80 hours in front of a white wall with light, powerful light and microphone, and accusing him that to be a spy of the United States. So he became like a puppet, so he signed the document. No, but he said to people, you know, he was totally out, he was not able to master his own body. But Jean Moulin was able to resist, like many others also, and to give his life to save hundreds of lives. Imagine if Jean Moulin have spoken, how many people he would have killed because of that. That is good. You know, he was an agnostic, he was a communist and agnostic, but he lived the gospel. There is no greater love of proof of love than to give his life for others. So I'm sure he has a good place in heaven. I'm not God, but I suppose that. Because it's not those who say, Lord, 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 it's those who do something. And Jean Moulin did something. Okay, a remark. The only action can be forced are the imperated action. Here, we cannot force the will directly. If we influence the will, it is indirectly through the intellect. If we disturb the intellect, if we tire the body, so there is no more resistance, and there is no capacity but the will continue to be not change. Okay? That is, it is something we saw during the war under the communist regime. You look at Cardinal Tran, who spent 15 years in jail. He was tortured. He was tortured, but he was faithful. So, and that is not of the past. Today, and today, even today, in Iraq, we have that. Exactly the same thing. So violence, it can be slavery, it can be deportation, it can be adoption. When it is something against the will, and we don't contribute to that. We don't. You have a case interesting in the United States is Earth. You remember Earth? She was Patty. She was the daughter of the richest man in the newspaper. And she was abducted. She was, and finally she espoused the cause of the people who would attack her. So she changed her mind. Maybe we don't know exactly what happened. Maybe she was drugged or she was, we don't know. Okay. Anyway, now illicit acts are voluntary by their nature. It can never be perforce. So that here is the stumbling block of education. Formation of children is here. It is to make them will by themselves. And sometimes when we ask them to will, it is against their concupiscible appetite. To will, that is the challenge of education, is to make a child will by himself. In such a way, you are no more there, he continues to live according to his own conviction. That is not to give information. Educate, it is to form, to use personally my own will. That is the challenge. Well, without violence and without fear. Without fear. Action done out of fear combine element of voluntary and involuntary. For some to be done because of fear, there must be at least some consent on the part of the will. Since the agent is led to what he does, not because of the fear itself, but in order to avoid the evil that is fear. So it's not the fear itself who makes you act against your will. It is the fear of the consequence. A good example of that is the black male. Black male, A black male, you are afraid that they will reveal some secret of your life. And because you are afraid, you pay. You pay to make those people keep silent. But in fact, you can also resist and say, I pay the consequence of an action. I committed adultery. It was taken by paparazzi, and it will be put in the newspaper. I don't accept blackmail. We can resist that. That means fear does not suppress your voluntary, your will. It can influence, but not suppress your will. For example, a soldier, when he is, you were a soldier, someone among you? No, no one a soldier. You go to the combat. You go with fear. But you don't go by fear. Maybe you go by fear because if you don't go, you will be executed. But when you go with fear. But you continue to be responsible. Fear is not, it is very rare that fear suppresses completely freedom. Very rare. Because there is always possibility to have the courage to oppose that, the virtue of fortitude, etc. So, next page. Yet what is done out of fear is also involuntary, in the sense that contrary to will-be is the will's inclination. To put the matter generally, action done because of fear remain voluntary or responsible, absolutely speaking. That means even if I act by fear, I am responsible because I was able to do the contrary. Okay? Although they become involuntary in a certain aspect because you act against your will and lessen responsibility. Okay, I give you an example, the classical example given by Aristotle and St. Thomas. You are on a ship, a cargo. You carry, for example, I don't know, copper, charge of copper. And there is a snowstorm, there is a storm. And the unique way of solving the boat is to jettison the cargo to the sea, to throw that to the sea. So the captain voluntarily jettisoned the ship. He is afraid. So the fear makes him to act voluntarily. And when he will arrive to the seaport, he have to explain what he did. He did that voluntarily. But if there will have been no storm, he will have not do that. That is a classical example. So that means we act by fear. We are less responsible, of course, but we continue also to be responsible. But we are less responsible, of course. We don't do that by fun. We say, I'm very happy, no, stupid. But he did voluntarily, he gave the order. Remember Jonas?
Yeah.
He was thrown voluntarily, he was jettisoned to the sea. And the whale saved him. Believe it or not. You know the story of the whale, huh? The child at school, they did that to you? It was maybe the 5th grade in public school, and the teacher wanted to mock a little bit the Bible. He spoke about Jonas. And he says it's impossible that Jonas be swallowed by the whale because they have, how do you call that, lack of fiber here, It's impossible. So the little girl said, no, it isn't the Bible, it is, he was swallowed by the whale, So the teacher, he said, no, it's not true. But she said, okay, when I will be in heaven, I will ask Jonas. And the teacher said, if Jonas is not in heaven, she said, I will ask you. Because he will be. Okay, so Jonas was jettisoned. When they did that, did they want to kill Jonas? No, they want to save the boat. And here we touch a problem, he has that, it is the problem with the double effect. We come back on that. Very, very important. Emotion influence also our freedom. So when I have emotion, my intellect is not very well enlightened because the emotion make us more fragile when we reason. Emotion can be said antecedent and can be said consequent. Well, antecedent, it arises independently of any stimulation or encouragement on the part of the will. You see something, you are attracted or you are furious. It is thus not a voluntary excitement. It is spontaneous. For example, the temptation. The temptation is before you have emotion, etc. It is called antecedent because it is prior to any act of the will. And here we can put all what happened before we consent. You remember here, number 1, 2, 3, and 4. There is no consent. We are attracted by the good. We are attracted. We see something. That is the phase of temptation. Temptation. And but emotion can influence my deliberation. Sometimes, once a young man is in love with a girl, sometimes people say, Love makes you blind. Huh? Love makes you blind. In marriage, open your eyes. In fact, emotion make blind. Is the reason why we should never take a decision on the emotion. Not to punish someone or not to buy something under emotion. Night is very good, so tomorrow we'll take the decision. Secondly, consequent emotion. We can provoke emotion. Emotion can be voluntary, either indirectly, when the will neglect to subdue it and to control it, or directly when it is provoked by the will. We can provoke emotion. For example, somebody wants to kill his enemy. He detests his enemy. What he does, he put the picture of that person, and with his gun, pa, 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 another, pa, 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 boom. Or he think about how he will kill the person, etc. The robber, he has emotion before he thinking is under the... We can provoke emotion of love, emotion of hatred, emotion of vengeance, and in that case we are responsible for our emotion. We can answer them, we can provoke them. Next paragraph, ignorance now. A word about ignorance. Not every ignorance deprives an act of its voluntarity. You remember the difference between ignorance and nescience? It was a question that they examined. Nescience is to know something, to ignore something we are not obliged to know. Ignorance is something we don't know, we should know. We should know. But ignorance can be invisible and invincible. We cannot overcome it. Or if you want, antecedent ignorance, before we act. So that is precedes the action and effectively make it involuntary. It is said to be invincible when it cannot be dispelled by the reasonable diligence a prudent man will be accepted to exercise in a given situation. So it is an ignorance because we cannot find a solution and we have to take a decision. And there is no way to call, there is no telephone, there is no possibility of information, and you have to take a decision. Okay? It can be for a doctor, for example. He has to take a decision, and or for a priest, etc., for anybody. Okay? Now, sometimes the ignorance is invincible. We can overcome it. We can triumph. We can suppress it. And we call that also consequent ignorance. Consequence ignorance. In some author, they call that crass ignorance. Very, very dirty ignorance. That means we voluntarily, we do not want to know the law, for example. I give you an example. You like to go fishing on the Connecticut River. You like that. But you don't want to know the date where it is permitted and the date where it is prohibited. You don't want to know that. Why? Because when you are fishing and the controller comes, the police comes and says, hey, you are not supposed to fish. Ah, I did not know. And you don't lie. In fact, you don't know. But you don't know voluntarily. Your ignorance is voluntary. And sometimes that happens as a pretext not to obey the law. In fact, we don't lie when we say to the police, we say that the police or the ranger, I don't know, it's true, you don't know, but you don't know because you don't want to know. Okay?
Ignorance of the law is not innocence.
Yes, but in ethics, of course it is. You are guilty for that. We are guilty, but we are not guilty the same manner if we know directly against the law. We call that invincible ignorance, or sometimes crass ignorance, or gross ignorance. Gross ignorance or crass ignorance. It's something I think is coming from France. Dirty. That's supine, or supine sometimes, we call that supine. You will see that with Father Malady. Well, forget that, okay? Forget supine. We study that in the future. We know we can be ignorant without willing it involuntarily. We can be ignorant voluntarily. And there is another kind of ignorance also we call concomitant ignorance. It is that of an agent who does something is not aware of doing, and who yet will be quite willing to do the same thing even if he were not ignorant. But here they give you an example. I will give you another example. Suppose Mr. A and Mr. B, A and Albert and Bernard. A and B, they test mutually. They don't like one another. And that is so strong that a day, Mr. A said, if ever I have the opportunity, I will suppress that guy. So we have A and we have Mr. B. Okay, so a day, Mr. A had the intention, a day or another, to kill Mr. B. Suppose in the Middle Age, you have the lords, because of find a pretext, marriage, or love, fidelity, adultery, etc. A day, A, the Lord A, goes hunting. With many, they go hunting with their harrow or spear, lance, and they are hunting deer with their dogs, etc. And Mr. A, he says, oh, hey, there is a deer there, and it killed. So A killed B. Kaput. Is A responsible of the death of B?
Is it the act?
No. No. It's surprising. He's not responsible. Why? Because when he is shooting, you see that? The arrow, he wanted to kill a deer. He did not want to kill B, Bernard. Therefore, the action at that moment was not to kill. So he killed by accident. But that killing, not murder, that killing is exactly what he desired to do. But it is not what makes him acting now. That is, we call that concomitant ignorance. He did not know that the deer was his worst enemy. But when he killed him, he did not kill him as his enemy. He wanted to kill a deer. Of course, after that you have a lot of problems, because people will say, you know, you killed because last year you told that you want to kill that man. Okay? So if you want to wait further, faculty will give you many kinds of intention. We come back on that. Okay. Now I go to the text of Father Austin Faculty. It is very well done. It's not difficult to read. I will try to touch with you some aspect. Well, first, the positive and negative voluntariness, number 2. So we saw that. We saw that we will, and not to will does not exist. It's to will, not to do something. Okay? Page 381, attention and intention in the middle. So I already spoke about that. Because you know, attention is moved by the will. That means my intellect is moved by the will. But just after 4 levels of intention, that is important. 4 levels of intention. That means, you remember, when we do something for an end, huh? For an end, for a motivation, or for intention. So we have 4 levels of intention. And I will try to summarize that in a chart here. Okay, so we are talking about intention. So there is 3 criteria. The intention was made at least once. Secondly, the intention is present. Or if you want, the intention influences the action. And finally, the attention is present to the person the person's conscience. Okay. So, first, if you go to the text, just about the attention. Huh? So the attention, it is the goal, the end we have when we do something, the motivation, the motive, etc. So if you go to page 382, you have 4 levels of intention. First, you have the actual level of intention. That means the person is conscious. So the actual level of intention. Actual intention. The person is conscious. That person, he or she, made once the decision. That means the decision was taken consciously. She was aware of that. Okay? Secondly, the intention is acting now. Well, I give you an example. You go to the store. You buy 3 chicken and 2 pounds of carrot. Okay, an order. Okay. And when you pay, you have an actual intention. You want to pay now, actually, really, with your money. So you have the intention in your mind. The intention is made in your mind. The intention is influencing the action of giving money to have what you bought. And the present, you are present to your intention. That means you have all the aspects. It is made once you decided to pay. That decision influences your action of paying now, and you are that intention is present at your conscience. So you are totally aware of what you are doing. Is there a one? When you marry, you must have an actual intention. Is the reason why we have 3 witnesses, a priest and 2 people. And they are there to see if you manifest clearly that you have the intention now, it is influencing your action, and you are very aware of what you are doing. Okay, that is actual intention. It is the strongest intention. You stand up, you say, I will see my bishop. That is actual intention. But we don't do that all the time. When you wake in the morning, you said, oh, my Jesus, I offer all my action for, I will do today, by love for you. And after that, you go, you take your tea or coffee, you go to the job, you work, etc. Okay? So we call that virtual intention. You decide to become a permanent deacon, and you are here. So it is, you are moved by, we call the virtual intention. A virtual intention is once made, you did that. For example, the day the bishop asks you, do you want to become a permanent deacon? You say yes. Do you want to marry Mrs. or Mr.? You say I do. Or say yes. That it is made once. But continually, do you do, oh no, I cook the toast because I want to be a good husband, a good wife. I don't know. You're crazy. When you study, you say, I study because I wanted the deacon. I study because I want a permanent deacon. No. But you study because of that, no? So that we call virtual intention. That intention is made once. It is influencing really your action. If you are here today because you decided, but that intention is not present to your conscience. How many times since the beginning of the class you thought about to become a future permanent deacon? It is when I spoke about that. No? But you do a lot of things. But you are guided, you are motivated by the intention you took at the beginning. Don't forget, the intention at the beginning is moving you all the time. As long as you don't change your mind, your decision. Because you are always free to change your decision. Now we have a third kind of habitual intention. We call that habitual intention. I will give you an example to understand that. That happened to me last year, 2 years ago. I was in my office in St. Philip, and suddenly I reminded that I have to print some text for my student for the next class. So what I did, I stood up, I walked down the hill, and I went to the copier. But just before the copier, Father Mosey was there with Mr. I don't think it is Cynthia. Ah, Father, you come for the meeting. I came to print paper. But 2 weeks ago, 1 week ago, when I received the message, of course, I wrote that in my agenda. I decided to go to that meeting. Once I decided to go. But when I was going to the copier, in fact, I stopped at the meeting. So the intention was not influencing my action and was not present to me. But it was habitual. It continued to be in, and when I entered the meeting in our room with my other colleagues of the staff, of the faculty, I was a normal teacher. Nobody asked me, but I know it was not, my intention was not acting on my action. That is habitual. I go to the text here. You know, don't call habitual. It does not imply any habit. It is an intention that once was had and still had, only in the sense that it was never revoked, for no psychic remnant of it need remain in the mind. For example, a man accepts an invitation to dinner. Exactly the same example I live, that happened to me. Maybe that happened to you also. You go to somewhere, you arrive just for the meeting of the life of Columbus. I did not know there was a need. And finally, we have a fourth kind of attention we call the interpretative attention. Interpretative. In fact, that attention was never made. That attention is not influencing your action, and that attention is not present to you now. We call that interpretative. Well, the example we can give about that, suppose a rich man suppose you are a pastor in the parish, a pastor, and a rich man give $5,000 to send to Cameroon to help the poor in Cameroon. So, another mission. But just at that time, there was a very huge fire, and many families in winter under the snow were in the outside of their house with nothing. So you have the parish priest, you say, hey, what is the most important? What is the emergency? Is to send that to Cameroon or to use that now for my poor people? So I say, okay, if Mr. Joe Blow, who gave me that money, was living, what will he do? I'm sure he will give, or Father, use the money for the people. I interpret the intention of the donator. I give you another example. A legislator makes a law in 1825 or 1850, for example. And that legislation was never revoked, but is no more adapted. For example, they say in the legislation, you know, horses, when they pass in the town, they must not go faster than 20 miles per hour. It's no more. So I can interpret, I say, if the legislator was living today, probably he will have suppressed that law. So we suppress the law. That is interpretative. That, maybe in your life that happens sometimes. You have to interpret a gift you receive, and the person is not there to interpret the law, so we have to interpret the law yourself. Next page. So what kind of intention is necessary? What is necessary? It is at least the actual intention. Of course, excuse me, a virtual intention. Virtual intention. Virtual intention. You cannot have continually an actual intention. It's impossible. It is the virtual intention. That means you have an intention, you fix your intention, and after that, that intention continues to move you in your, and you don't revoke it. As long as you don't change your intention is in that direction. So that for a Catholic, for a Christian, for example, it's important to offer our day in the morning. Everything I will do, Lord, is by love for you, for example. You know? So that means I will not think about that during the day, but that intention is efficient. Intention oriented on all my actions toward God, toward Jesus. Now, next page. I have a few minutes to explain rapidly the foreseen consequences. I mean, when you want directly an action, at the same time, sometimes happens we want indirectly some effects. Because that's the cause of the consequence of the Voluntary Act. In page 385, you have the principle of the double effect principle. So I give you, maybe I will try to give you the text of Father Wallace about the double effect. It is a classical text. Even here we receive the eminent doctor who spoke in 1990 about 1998, when I was here, the first time I was here. And she used the text of Father Wallace, Father Fagotti, exactly. She said Father Fagotti. It is very, very clear, very clear. So you have that here, a summary of that. And after that you have what we studied just before, ignorance. you know, antecedent, the fear, and strength, force, violence. So you can read that. It is not difficult. It is excellent complement for your first part, the first part of the chapter. So next week, we have only 2 weeks. Next week we study morality and responsibility, law and right reason, and the 14th of April. So think about your reflection paper. It can be a subject in ethics, it can be a subject on philosophy of God. Take something very simple with an application in your life. It can be about intention, it can be about, not something complicated. We expose, well, what is that? What is that? And we apply that to some concrete situation. It's only a reflection. No, it's not a class to explain everything. Apply that to a concrete situation. The case of fear, for example, the case of violence, or the intention for tonight, for example, or last week, or the proof of the existence of God. Maybe one proof strikes you especially, or the problem of evil, etc. Okay, so have a good week. And now I will give you the compendium. So for the compendium, you can work in team.